appearance of a sign in the visible and the invisible heaven before the appearance of each of the divine manifestations. And we mentioned, I think we were up to Rusbeh, also known as Salman, who was in contact with 4 heralds of Muhammad. The traditions outside of the Íqán recount that these were bishops, Christian bishops, in different centers of the Middle East, and that he was sent from one to the other, and when they would die, they would say, now you must go and be in the service of this other bishop. And they told him prophecies about the coming of the messenger of God. And they said that he should travel south into the Hijaz, and he was headed that way when he was kidnapped and sold as a slave and taken by some of the tribesmen of the area of Medina to that district, and who was in their service as a slave. He recognized in one of the places that he went a certain lava flow and the position of rocks and things that he'd heard from one of these heralds. And he was hopeful that he would yet attain the goal of his desire, and that God was somehow guiding him through this calamity to recognize Muhammad, to find Muhammad. And one day he was in a date tree eating dates, and he heard some men below the tree talking about that there is a man who claims to be a messenger of God in Mecca. And he got so excited he fell out of the tree. And eventually, of course, Muhammad comes to Medina, and in one of the outskirts, before he arrives at the place, he's there. And Rusbeh steals away and goes to see for himself who he is. And he also, at one point, asks the messenger if he could see the sign of prophecy that was supposed to be a mark on Muhammad's back. And he eventually saw that also, and he was confirmed anyway in his belief, and he became one of the outstanding servants of Muhammad, named Salman. He eventually had his freedom from slavery. As to the day in which we are now, we know you can turn to page 65 for these texts. We have a few more copies of the comparison between the page numbering in the American Íqán and the British one. Somebody needs that? In the bottom paragraph on page 65, and now concerning this wondrous and most exalted cause, know thou verily that many an astronomer hath announced the appearance of its star in the visible heaven. Likewise there appeared on earth Ahmad and Qazim, those twin resplendent lights, and God sanctify their resting place. And I'll go into the details of this a little. The appearance of its star, William Sears did a lot of investigating for his books. So just to paraphrase something that he's found, he said in 1843, just prior to the declaration of the Bab, a great comet suddenly appeared in the heavens. And he quotes from a book which says the comet of 1843 is regarded as perhaps the most marvelous of the present age, having been observed in the daytime even before it was visible at night, passing very near the sun, exhibiting an enormous length of tail and arousing interest in the public mind as universal and deep as it was unprecedented. And you'll find some more details on stars and comets of the period in Thief in the Night, page 195, 199. We'll refer you to other books. Also, Bill Sears has a couple pages 217 to 219 in Release the Sun, one of his earlier books, where he also has done a summary of these. This is one that he talks about this comet that, as I said, it had quite a long tail, but there was a second comet that was just behind the first one. They're moving together. And as the years passed and into the 1850s, then this that comet moved forward and became brighter, and was much brighter than the original comet. And this is, he quotes that as the sign of the invisible heaven.
Please click like for this video and subscribe for more great content.
Ahmad and Kazim, of course, refer to Sheikh Ahmad Asai and Sayyid Kazim Rashti. Now, the first of these twin resplendent lights was Sheikh Ahmad, who heralded the Bab in Baha'u'llah both, who was the founder of the Shaykhi movement, which is a known Islamic movement within Shia Islam. And he was the author of numerous religious writings, poems and tomes of his writings. Dr. Rafati has made a study of this. In fact, his doctoral dissertation was on Shaykhism and the writings of Sheikh Ahmad. That can be found in the library here, in the library. He died in 1826. This is after the birth of both of the manifestations, but some time before their missions. He's buried in Medina. In the Epistle to the Son of the Wolf, Baha'u'llah says, the followers of Sheikh Asai, in other words, Sheikh Ahmad, have, by the aid of God, apprehended that which was veiled from the comprehension of others, and of which they remained deprived. It says something about the Shaykhi writings. There's a lot more detail on this, on Sheikh Ahmad, and his appearance in the first chapter of the Dawnbreakers. Sayyid Kazim Rashti was the second of these twin resplendent lights. He was the chief disciple of Sheikh Ahmad and his successor, and he died at Karbala at the end of December 1843, just months before the declaration of the bomb. On page 66, Baha'u'llah summarizes this. He says, from all that we have stated, it has become clear and manifest that before the revelation of each of the signs reflecting the divine essence, each of the mirrors, reflecting the divine essence, the signs heralding their advent must needs be revealed in the visible heaven as well as in the invisible, wherein is the seat of the sun of knowledge, of the moon of wisdom, and of the stars of understanding and utterance. The sign of the invisible heaven must needs be revealed in the person of that perfect man, who, before each manifestation, appeareth, educateth, and prepareth the souls of men for the advent of the divine luminary, the light of the unity of God amongst men. Now, when we know of the very special characteristics of this day, that the full messenger of God, a manifestation of God, also served as the herald, the Bab in this case, serving as the herald in this position for Baha'u'llah's ministry. On the next page, in 67, we have some explanations about the word heaven. The term heaven denotes loftiness and exaltation, inasmuch as it is the seat of the revelation of those manifestations of holiness, the day springs of ancient glory. These ancient beings, though delivered from the womb of their mother, have in reality descended from the heaven of the will of God. We referred to this earlier, but there's another quotation here from a letter of the Guardian, 9 October 1947, which says, the prophets, unlike us, are pre-existent. The soul of Christ existed in the spiritual world before his birth in this world. We cannot imagine what that world is like, so words are inadequate to picture his state of being. This is published in the book High Endeavors, to be found on page 71. Then he goes on to say, though they be dwelling on this earth, yet their true habitations are the retreats of glory in the realms above. While walking amongst mortals, they soar in the heaven of the divine presence. Without feet they tread the path of the Spirit, and without wings they rise unto the exalted heights of divine unity. With every fleeting breath they cover the immensity of space, and every moment traverse the kingdoms of the visible and the invisible. Upon their thrones is written, nothing whatsoever keepeth him from being occupied with any other thing, And on their seats is inscribed, "Verily his ways differ every day." This wondrous, how do we understand the manifestation of God spiritually is intimately connected with every human soul, not only that's lived now, but that has lived in the past and that's about to be born in this dispensation. And nothing that he does keeps him from being occupied with anything else that he needs to do. That's a hard one to put our minds around, since we are suffering from such limitations in this realm. But this is the character of the universal manifestation of God. Another order of beings and human beings, though they appear wrapped in the clouds, if you will, of human limitations. Abdu'l-Baha comments in this regard. He says, the people, talking about the people, he says, they imagine that Christ was excluded from his heaven in the days when he walked the earth, that he fell from the heights of his sublimity, and afterwards mounted to those upper reaches of the sky, to the heaven which doth not exist at all, for it is but space. Whereas the heaven of the manifestation is his inner state and his inner being, and he never removes himself from it to appear in this world. He appears in this world, at the same time he is a dweller of the highest realms of the dominion. In fact, there's a tablet from Master, I believe it is, who says that the manifestations of God, we have various stages in the progress of our soul, which starts with the soul wedded to evil, and it moves through this stage of the as you mentioned in the beginning, there's concupiscence and irascibility, and then the stage of inspiration, where the soul is inspired with the difference between good and evil, and does its best to choose good things for change. And then he moves into these other stages of certitude and knowledge and perfection. And finally, up about 6 stages, he comes to the stage of the kingdom. That we're always talking about, well, we hear people say, well, we'll meet in the kingdom. Of course, the kingdom is a term for the next world generally, but it's also a very exalted stage in spiritual progress. And we may not all find ourselves flashing into it when we pass away. Now, beyond that is another stage, and he describes that also. It's called, that's the kingdom, the other is called the dominion. And there are 2 different stages. And in the writings, in the original, they're called Malakut and Jabarut. And you see those 2 words even in English 7 Valleys. He talks about the stages of Malakut and Jabarut. And they're found throughout the writings, one after the other. And it sounds in English like he may be describing the same thing, whereas there are 2 distinct stages of the invisible realm, as defined by the Guardian, explained by the Guardian even in the glossary. It talks about 7th heaven, it's referring to this Jabarut. Now, with regard to the Jabarut, or the dominion on high, he says the souls of the manifestations of God, far from having to go through all these developments, are originally conceived in that realm and remain in that. They never go through these stages. They're always there, even though they're with us on earth. At the same time, their spirits are soaring in those highest realms. And they recount to us visions and happenings and events of that realm. Sometimes in their tablets, all about these things he's seen, things he's heard, and so on. The individual souls of the manifestations retain their reality in the next world, though they are the fountainheads of the appearance of the names and attributes of God. They still have their individuality. And when we go to the next world, Shoghi Effendi has said in the letters, attaining to the presence of God signifies attaining to the presence of those holy manifestations of God. That's the highest attaining to God that we have in the realms of creation. And of course, the next world is a realm of creation with regard to us and with regard actually to the individual manifestations of God. Their oneness that uniquely become these 2-fold aspects of this. Again, you're familiar with that already, I think. The state of their abstraction and their infinite sublimity and unity is an all-encompassing reality that's known as the primal will, or the middle line in the ringstone, the world of command, which is also called the world of the kingdom. Their kingdom, Malakut, has another meaning. It's not the world that we're going to attain to, that the souls of those who pass on come to, or that the souls of those who attain to God's good pleasure are dwelling in while they're dwelling on this earth, because Abdu'l-Baha also says there are angels in this world who are already in the kingdom, though they're living on this earth. And that is possible for us to be dwellers in that realm while we're still walking in this world. So it's not just the manifestation that has that possibility, but there is the potentiality, we could say, for others to do that. In the hidden words, he says, "This is that which we have ordained for thee in our kingdom on high and our exalted dominion." You know, it sounds it's poetic and beautiful. It refers to two distinct and highest stages of the spiritual realm, which the soul is moving towards, if you will. It's its purpose, creation, to move towards them. In each of those realms, the perception of the manifestation of God, we have seen, becomes clearer and more evident and more splendorous. On page 68, Baha'u'llah refers to heaven, distinct heavens. He cites here the names of the distinct heavens, indicating that each has a special meaning. While not revealing the intention of these heavens, each is related to terms that to some extent are defined in other passages in the Bahá'í writings. You can use the concordance and look them up, and perhaps you'll be able to, by examining them, help yourself to understand something of the meaning of them in the context of the different passages. Top of page 68. Heaven of command, and this is that world, the same command that's called the world of command, that same word, Am. It has reference back to the He who by His commanding word has called creation into being. That commanding word is not so much a word as we understand words, but a state, a power, if you will. It's indicative of God's power, His might, and His creative force. So it's made up of the letters B and E, or in Arabic, Qaf and Nun. Kun becomes the fiat, the command, divine command to bring things into being. The D and the E are the same translation in the English of the two letters that gives us this command B. So the world of command is the world of He who has that commanding word in His power. And that word He is pronouncing eternally, if you will. It's not something that it happens and is finished in a sense. It goes on through His existence, through the existence of the world of command, through the presence of the manifestation of God. Things live, move, and have their being. There is no separation. It's not like you make a cake and put it in the icebox. It's something that's constantly a part and a presence and a sustenance, if you will, of the Spirit. In the same way, in the sense that your body can't exist without the existence of the soul. As soon as the soul pulls off of it, it loses its function. So creation, in that sense, is wedded to the Spirit of the Holy Spirit, or that Spirit of the manifestation that sustains and animates it and instills it with significances and potencies, which, as we remove the veils of our separateness, of our isolation, in our own realm of idle fancies and vain imaginings and limitations, we begin to perceive. Our natural birthright is to see with the eye of God and hear with His ears. If we move towards that and push towards that, we have all these promises in the writings that we will begin to see these things in their proper relationships. And see that discovering the principles of relationships between things and between the dynamics of the means and attributes of God is one of the great functions of wisdom and development and maturity in the human soul. That also then has its counterpart in the ethical field, and how we treat each other, how we act in our relation with other creatures. The love that we have for God, how much that we have for His creation, and how much more for the most exalted zenith of His creation, other human souls, who are these repositories, as Buddhism calls them in one place, of the human souls, as a repository of the ancient mysteries of God. Each of our souls. He talks about the heaven of will, the heaven of divine purpose. Now this is Max Latin at our base, for those of you who know the American. And these two are identified by the Bahá'í, interestingly enough, in the tablet, where he says, what is this thought and what is this mood? He says the thought, which is the letter B, corresponds to the primal will, and the letter E corresponds to this divine purpose. And these are the 7 stages through which everything comes into contingent being, as described by the Bible. And these are the two highest ones. And the combination of this active and passive force gives birth then to the whole multiplicity of creation. The singleness, there's not differentiation yet in this divine will. It's all possibility exists within our manifestation of that element. When He conceives the purpose, when God decides how creation will be, then He comes into the second stage, and from there it comes out into divine decree, divine predestination, the attachment to things of the correct proportion, the timing, the place, all of the things that we know, space, everything that we know we have to deal with. And the aspect of the subject that God gives you in a number of places. And maybe there'll be more written about it in the future. But just to give us a taste of the fact that things come down by stages until when we get to our lowest of all levels here. This is that arc of descent that Dunbar speaks about, to which contingencies grow until the development of means, of material means, if you will, is at its maximum, in the opposite position from the divine center. And at that point, man appears in his development, and he inscribes with his progress the arc of ascent back to the Supreme Center. And these stages of his growth in the arc of ascent are these same divine presence, possibility, divine dictate, they've been marked that way. Although they can be described in a number of different manners, and the writings recorded in different other possibilities. So man stands at I like to think of this, one of the meanings of this distance of two bows. It's a way he describes that man is close to God. He said he's the distance of two bows. But in another sense, he's also the distance of two bows, the two arcs of the arc of descent and the arc of ascent. And he has the fullest of this material expression of God, and he has the potential for the fullest spiritual development of any of us creatures. And he moves up this, because nothing else moves, so that stays at the bottom. But if it's at the bottom by divine will, such as the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, we should remember that they have no fault in themselves. They are perfect. And they're potentially perfect. In some way, He's involved us with the developments of plants and animals, bring them to their full potential. But in themselves, they are expressions, clear, dynamic expressions of divine will. You want to know, well, what did God do? He says, contemplate creation, the whole created creatures. The miracle of the way all these things are developed and coordinated, and interaction and involvement of all creatures with all other creatures. In that is all of the secrets of the dynamics of God's purpose, of His laws, of His rules, and so on. Now, the attainment to these understandings, if I understand any of this in some degree, the point is we attain to the heaven of knowledge. Through the manifestation of God, we become endowed with divine understanding. So, in a sense, then we begin to soar in the heaven of divine understanding. We come out of the tomb of our limited materialistic constrictions and blindness, and we begin to soar in the heavens of divine knowledge, in the heavens of divine recognition, in the heaven of certitude, the whole purpose of this book. And we begin to penetrate some of these mysteries, or at least catch fragrances of them, and He turns us from our puny existence into the beginning of being these seekers after God's purposes, being those who pursue the purpose of God in creation. This is a complete change, like changing from caterpillars into butterflies. And a new dimension, a new realm. He also says that these means, the significance of which is revealed to none save those that have been initiated into the divine mysteries, which also tells us that there are divine mysteries to be initiated into. It isn't all just what's on the surface. There's a lot of other things we have to come to by our action, by the changes that take place in our own inner being, so that we can acquire taste, attraction to these things. For example, he said, "The heaven hath sustenance for you, and it containeth that which you are promised." Whereas, he says, how strange this is. It is the earth that yieldeth such sustenance and giveth you food. And there's this verse of the Quran that says, "Heaven hath sustenance for you." So what does this mean? He says, we have to constantly think, meditate, what's the meaning? Likewise, he says, the names come down from heaven, whereas they proceed out of the mouth of men. If thou to cleanse the mirror of thy heart from the dust of malice, thou wouldst apprehend the meaning of the symbolic terms revealed by the all-embracing word of God made manifest in the dispensation, and thus discover the mysteries of divine knowledge. Not, however, until thou consumest with the veil of utter detachment, with the flame of utter detachment, those veils of idle learning that are current amongst men, and shall behold the resplendent morn of true knowledge. We find ourselves, though we must absorb scientific knowledge, but we must not swallow it whole. We must be aware of the possibilities that the paradigms that are existing around us now may not give us a true picture of creation. And in fact, we are in such a devastating and materialistic phase of existence that we have scientific paradigms that ignore the existence of God and say it doesn't have anything really to do with scientific understanding. And this is surely a mistake of tremendous magnitude. And how these all fit together, the chain of being, the predominance of spirit over matter, are things that are not well understood, nor taught, nor absorbed. So we take in all of these things, and then we're trying to understand the words of God, and we want science and religion to agree. We have to be true, educated, but we also have to be free from these things, to allow ourselves new understanding. And then we maybe will discover new scientific connections, as indeed right now we're coming away from this period of hardbound Newtonian physics into something that's much broader and much closer, if you will, to the nature of the divine teachings. On the next page is this marvelous passage about the two kinds of knowledge, divine and satanic knowledge. This fits in with the theme we're just talking about. The one, he says, the divine knowledge, the one welleth out from the fountain of divine inspiration. The other is but a reflection of vain and obscure thoughts. The source of the former is God himself. The motive force of the latter, the whisperings of selfish desire. The one is guided by the principle, fear ye God, God will teach you. The other is but a confirmation of the truth. Knowledge is the most grievous veil between man and his Creator. The former bringeth forth the fruit of patience, of longing desire, of true understanding and love, whilst the latter can yield naught but arrogance, vain glory, and conceit. From the sayings of those masters of holy utterance who have expounded the meaning of true knowledge, the odor of these dark teachings which have obscured the world can in no wise be detected. The tree of such teachings can yield no result except iniquity and rebellion, and beareth no fruit but hatred and envy. Its fruit is deadly poison, its shadow a consuming fire. How well hath it been said, cling under the robe of the desire of thy heart, and put thou away all sin. Indeed, the world rise be gone, however great. Amen. Two comments on this. By the way, on the previous page, the names come down from heaven. There's no footnote to identify. It is a Persian proverb. Obviously, this passage is exposing the knowledge which is divine in origin, and condemns that knowledge which arises from the self of man. Human learning can act as a terrible veil, blinding the soul to its purpose in life and its ultimate destiny. Useful knowledge acquired in conformity with the bidding of the prophets of God is, however, most praiseworthy, as Bahá'í indicates. Arts, crafts, and science uplift the world of being and are conducive to its exaltation. Knowledge is as wings to man's life, and a ladder for his ascent. Its acquisition is incumbent upon everyone. In truth, knowledge is a veritable treasure for man, and a source of glory, of comfort, joy, of exultation, cheer and gladness unto him. Happy the man that feedeth on it, and will be tired to feed this. While Baha'u'llah extols the study of sciences and arts, he directs men to such sciences that are useful and will be bound to the progress and advancement of the people. The point to bear in mind with regard to the acquisition of knowledge and education is that it must not be allowed to become a barrier between oneself and God. In other words, if we undertake, first is the knowledge of God, the recognition of God in His manifestation. Second is the acquisition of learning because it is the desire of the manifestation of God, not because of personal ambition or desire for position in the world, but rather because of love of God. But now that I'm a Baha'i and I understand what this means, I want to enhance my being, so that I will be able to be of service to others, so that I will have the means and tools to comprehend things that I didn't understand otherwise. And this becomes then the powerful motive for learning. And in that balance, Abu Bakr will sit. But if it's undertaken for any other purpose, that it will lead by degrees to insanity. Insanity means lack of health and mental aberration. And a lot of people are stuck in that heaven of insanity that they're in. And they can't see the faith in the famous thing, they can't understand the very plain and most exalted truth that corresponds and resonates to the innermost part of their being. They can't recognize it. And they can't hear it. They can't hear through the veils of what they have decided is true and right and good and bad. And that's why knowledge can become the most grievous veil, separating man from God. Now, we've accepted that we have good faith and everything, but at the same time, some of our acquired learning still dictates to us, or our own culture dictates to us. What degree of time can I give to this? What depth of devotion should I apply to my religious activities? I don't want to be fanatic. I need to be moderate. Where does the scale of moderation come? From our families, from our society, from our particular tribal setting? Is that moderation as Baha'u'llah has defined? Or is what Baha'u'llah says moderation? And we shouldn't go beyond what he says. So seek a martyr's death in my path. We shouldn't go farther than that. That's far. We want to find a moderate. Mostly moderation that we deal with, we think we're dealing with is what Baha'u'llah says in one case and what the world says in the other, and we station ourselves somewhere in the middle, in that lukewarm, nether land that doesn't really give us any advantage either way. Neither do we enjoy the world or we stay in our moderate position, treading water and not going anywhere. You need to think about this. What is moderation? What is the moderation of this tolerance? Abdu'l-Baha emphasizes the truth as follows. He says, although to acquire the sciences and arts is the greatest glory of mankind, this is so only on condition that man's river flow into the mighty sea and draw from God's ancient source his inspiration. When this cometh to pass, then every teacher is as a shoreless ocean, every pupil a prodigal fountain of knowledge. If then the pursuit of knowledge lead to the beauty of him who is the object of all knowledge, how excellent that goal. But if not, a mere drop will perhaps shut a man off from the flooding grace. For with learning cometh arrogance and pride, and with learning cometh error and indifference to God. The sciences of this world are droplets of reality. If then they lead not to reality, what fruit can come of illusion? By the one true God, if learning be not a means of access to Him, the most manifest, it is nothing but evident lights. It's incumbent upon you to acquire the various branches of knowledge and to turn thy face toward the beauty of the manifest truth. Thou mayst be a sign of saving guidance amongst the peoples of the world, and a focal center of understanding, this sphere, and which the wise in their wisdom are silent. Set, or whoso setteth foot, in the kingdom of lights, and becomes informed of the veiled and hidden mystery, the secret of all God. This location is in the education, the compilation of education, which will be. Again, fear you God, God will teach you. This is not footnoted here. It is a Quranic citation. It's the 2nd Surah, verse 292. Knowledge is the most grievous veil, is a traditional Sufi saying. Bring thee unto the robe of the desire of thy heart. This is from the poem of Ibn Faris of Egypt. And this verse is about 1198 AD. Fear ye God, God will teach you. Remember about the fear of God, what all that is in the 7 valleys. If you fear God, all things will fear you. And if you fear not God, you will fear all things. This is very important that we come to this proper relationship with God. That will involve, seems to me, dependence and trust in God. And longing that we might not offend Him. And longing that we should conform ourselves to His good pleasure, so that we don't attract His glances of the wrong kind. And this led us to this story we did. I've heard a story today, Mr. Nakarani was saying that when he was a little boy, they went to the shrine the box every time he was there, and he would stand at the door, and when he would come to the door, and he would pour rose water, powder in their hands, and he would put that on his face, and so on. He said we were all lined up, his friends were lined up, and one man came to say, and they'd been passing him, the line had been moving along, and suddenly the line stopped. So they said, we all kind of leaned out to see what was going on, and there we saw each other like one. Man was standing there, with his head down, and he was humble, and his hands up. And the guardian was holding the bottle, and he was looking at him. And he looked at him, and looked at him, and looked at him from and he stopped the whole line. He didn't pour any water. And we all began to express. This is also one thing that I thought of. As a little boy that I said, I got to behave myself. I don't want this thing to happen to me ever. And he said, it seemed to me like half an hour. It was probably 30 seconds. But it could have been infinity. Everyone in the whole community that was there became aware that the guardian was searching this man's soul. Finally, the guardian broke his concentration on him. Sweetness of the sound. We don't want that to happen to us. This is not that we fear the punishment of God. That would be good for us too. If we could just, feel that we don't want to ever have to see the displeasure, the glance of displeasure of God. Or if He sees us and knows something about it, and He just looks away to avoid having to deal with our shortcomings. How much would that? Somehow, if we contemplate these things ahead of time, maybe it'll help us to conform ourselves to His way. I remember a very strong story I read some years ago. One of the traditional hadiths. It says, Muhammad, in Islam, the punishment for adultery is stoning to death. Some of the modern nations are still trying to install again. It requires, of course, a system of witnesses that can prove that it can happen. It doesn't happen very often. And in this particular case, Muhammad was in the square in Medina in the afternoon speaking with friends. One of the believers came forward to him and stood before him. He said, "O Muhammad, I committed adultery." And the hadith says, when the man said that, Muhammad turned and left down the other way, talked about it. He ignored it. And the man came around again, told him again. Muhammad again didn't respond to him, turned another direction, went on with what he was doing. And the third time the man came and stood in front of him. And Muhammad said, the punishment of death has stoned. And the man was taken there by the people that were there. And they were stoned. And then Muhammad walked over. And he says, Muhammad walked over to the man and he stood over him. And he wept. He said, he was a people. And here we've got Muhammad's personal, spiritual feelings of forgiveness. The law of God is there. So there's all this compassion at the same time that sometimes the invocation of punishment. Now we have different analogies and saying, and that is so hard. But if you study the going against that command, you still have to think of that. Now, in the next paragraph, you'll notice a quotation. I'm not going to go into all of these things, but he that treadeth the snow white path and followeth in the footsteps of the crimson pillars will never attain unto his abode unless his hands are empty of those worldly creatures perished by men. The source of this is Abdul Qadir Muhyiddin Jilani. And maybe some of you study Muslim literature will know who that is. Abu Qadir Muhyiddin Jilani. And the work it's in is the Rishalatul Iraq. Rishalatul Iraq. Baha'u'llah questions on page 71 says, when will a faithful seeker be found who will don the garb of pilgrimage, attain the Kaaba of the heart's desire, and without ear or tongue discover the mystery of divine utterance? His insinuation, how he moves on in this book and constantly appeals to that part of it, the spiritual adventure, if you will, who is sparked by these words and tries to change his understanding. Just above that, he says that we have digressed from the purpose, page 70, from the purpose of our argument, although whatsoever is mentioned serveth only to confirm our purpose. By God, however great our desire to be brief, yet we feel we cannot restrain our pen, notwithstanding all that we have mentioned, how innumerable are the pearls that have remained unpierced in the shell of our heart, how many the pulleys, like matings with inner meaning, that are as yet concealed within the chambers of divine wisdom. None has yet approached it, who is in no man nor spirit has touched before. And he's drawn on this verses of the Quran that promise that faithful that they will have maidens, they will attain to maidens that no man nor spirit has touched before. This the Muslims always have it. It's giving a spiritual meaning to the whole question that these words are the inner meanings of the divine verses and things and knowledge. Nature of progressive revelation. Now we come up to page 71. Do you have something you want to ask me up to this point? Is there some point that you'd like to ask about clarification since we're not dealing with all of it? Seven heavens. Sometimes spoken of that way, but what I was really referring to are 7 stages of the development of the soul, which in a sense may have some parallel to that, but not quite in the same way. There are these 7 heavens that are mentioned in the ninth commandment, where each one of them is a divine manifestation acting as the center of that heaven. Again, we have this affirmation that the soul of the manifestation is in the highest realm, though he may have his appearance in the 4th heaven. As it says here, Christ is in the 4th heaven. Each one seems to be the 2 different religions. Christ is in the 4th heaven, Muhammad is in the 5th heaven, the Bahá'í is in the 6th heaven, Baha'u'llah is in the 7th heaven. I don't know how that works. If you go in 7th heaven, you get this progressive arrangement or relation. Maybe that has some meaning or not. But the question of these 7 stages are stages of the soul's own development. And one of those is the kingdom. Now, whether the kingdom has those 7 heavens in it, I don't know. You see, each stage has different stages within it. And figure it all out. This indicates that there are realms within realms. In my Father's house are many mansions. Kind of a strange thing. When you think of it. In the realm of my Father, there are infinite worlds and realms to attain and to do. But I don't think I would take that as a contradiction of these other things. It's just how to put it together. Keep all the pieces together and see if they fit some. You maybe get another element and then they fit. I didn't give one. But if you look up in the concordance concupiscence or irascibility, that's the only place it is. And he talks about it. He says he does not want to dwell on it because it's in the books of the past. In Islam they had a lot on that. But there is a tablet by Abdul Baha where he describes some in a good paragraph for each one. And Baha'u'llah refers to them in other tablets too. He says a few pages on, he says, we have already mentioned these stages of the soul in other places. But what he wants to know is that every person, every soul that walks humbly with his Lord in this day will attain to all those stages. You don't have to go after them and make a plan to try to attain each one. By the general observance of the laws of God, and particularly fasting and obligatory prayer and adherence to this. So all the laws that we have, the soul will move through all these stages. We must trust that we don't have to. There isn't something else, like Hindu meditation or something, or TM, or sometimes the Baha'is write in and say, I love the faith, but I feel like I need one of these other things to become really spiritual, And it's a distraction, really. We should trust that the supreme manifestation of God in His most holy book has given those elements which will promote the highest interests of the human soul. There's no need to go out of it for something else. You can examine those and see the influences that they have and be appreciative of them and so on. But keep this core of the divine laws of Baha'u'llah at the center of your life. And those are the luminous orbs, we could say. He's adorned the heaven of His religion with these stars, these lights of His commandments. On page 73, it is evident that the changes brought about in every dispensation constitute the dark clouds that intervene between the eyes of man's understanding and the divine luminary which shineth forth from the dayspring of the divine essence. Consider how men for generations have been blindly imitating their fathers and have been trained according to such ways and manners as have been laid down by the dictates of their faith. Were these men, therefore, to discover suddenly that a man who hath been living in their midst, who with respect to every human limitation hath been their equal, had risen to abolish every established principle imposed by their faith, principles by which for centuries they have been disciplined, and every opposer and denier of which they have come to regard as infidel, profligate, and wicked, they would of a certainty be veiled and hindered from acknowledging His truth. Such things are as clouds that veil the eyes of those whose inner being hath not tasted the salsabil of detachment, nor drunk from the kosar of the knowledge of God. Such men, when acquainted with these circumstances, become so veiled that without the least question they pronounce the manifestation of God an infidel and sentence him to death. You must have heard of such things taking place all down the ages and are now observing them in these days. It behoveth us, therefore, to make the utmost endeavor that by God's invisible assistance, these dark veils, these clouds of heaven-sent trials, may not hinder us from beholding the beauty of His shining countenance, and that we may recognize Him only by His own self. That passage is cited in the Gleaning. Section 13 of the Gleaning. Recognize Him only by His own self. In another tablet, Baha'u'llah says, the first and foremost testimony establishing His truth is His own self. Next to this testimony is His revelation. For whoso faileth to recognize either the one or the other, he hath established the words He hath revealed as proof of His reality and truth. Now, for us, we are not in the presence of the manifestation of God. But His first proof, he says, would be His own being, just that he exists, that such a creature exists, that such a being is there. And people would recognize him on sight who were sensitive, of course. The second, he says, is the power of revelation. Revelation, not the word, because he establishes that as the third. In other words, not what the words say, but the outpouring of revelation from the prophet of God is the second most important proof. This extraordinary capacity to reveal the divine book. And third, the content of the book. Now, we're dealing with the content of the book, but through the content of the book, we come back to marvel at the power of revelation, and finally we identify this self of Baha'u'llah and come to focus ourselves on it. It works the reverse way in our time, but still we come to it. This is that particular quotation is found in Gleanings, page 105. And again he says, he who is everlastingly hidden from the eyes of men can never be known except through his manifestation. And his manifestation can adduce no greater proof of the truth of his mission than the proof of his own person. And if we had time, we could read accounts of people who saw Baha'u'llah, what they felt when they came into Baha'u'llah's presence, how they were overwhelmed, how they couldn't look at him, but still just being there, even not looking at him, they could feel the influence of him on their whole existence. And how Baha'u'llah sometimes, out of charity and kindness to the friends, would, while he was speaking to them, he would turn sideways and speak in another direction and expound, so that they could look at him from the side, to not catch the glance of his eyes, which was too overwhelming for them. And it gives them an opportunity to catch a glance of the manifestation. And then he would serve them tea. I mean, they didn't do too well. You know, these stories of people spilling tea on themselves. Moving on. I think I told you that the first time we did this class, it took 14 months, because we read everything in class. We don't have really that amount of time now, and many of you are not here for 14 months. So we're doing what we call an introduction to the study. That was still an introduction. This is more of an introduction. The meaning of smoke comes up in the next few pages. You can deal with that yourselves. Angels on page 78 is a very lovely passage here about angels at the bottom. It says, and he shall send his angels. By angels is meant those who, reinforced by the power of the Spirit, have consumed with the fire of the love of God all human traits and limitations, and have clothed themselves with the attributes of the most exalted beings and of the cherubim. There's some interesting references here to the cherubim, who are an order of angels. I think traditional cherubim, the Christians hold them to be of the second of the ninefold celestial hierarchy. They are gifted angels, gifted with knowledge and wisdom. Sadek was mentioned here. As we see, the footnote is the sixth of the 12 imams of the Shia Muslims. And he's quoted different times, as are the various imams by Baha'u'llah in this book. He says, there stand a company of our fellow Shias behind the throne. Diverse and manifold are the interpretations of the words behind the throne. In one sense, they indicate that no true Shias exist. Even as he had said in another passage, a true believer is likened unto the philosopher's stone. Addressing subsequently his listener, he said, hast thou ever seen the philosopher's stone? Reflect how this symbolic language, more eloquent than any speech, however direct, testifies to the non-existence of a true believer. Such is the testimony of Sadek. And now consider how unfair and numerous are those who, although they themselves have failed to inhale the fragrance of belief, have condemned as infidels those by whose word belief itself is recognized and established. And then he goes here on, he says, and now, inasmuch as these holy beings have sanctified themselves from every human limitation, have become endowed with the attributes of the spiritual, and have been adorned with the noble traits of the blessed, They therefore have been designated as angels. Such is the meaning of these verses, every word of which has been expounded by the aid of the most lucid texts and most convincing arguments and the best established evidences. Move on a bit to our outlines. You have your outline there? Page 80 on. Meaning of angels we just dealt with. Objections and differences persist in every age, page 80 to 83. Alleged corruption of the text, 83 to 90. Generally, he gives the meaning of the corruption of the text. He said this is not that people have actually changed the text. It refers to the interpretations that have been placed on these texts and which become traditional understanding, and everyone thinks, well, that's the meaning that they have, like the souls will rise out of their tombs in the last days. There's a traditional saying that becomes fixed in consciousness, that it means that people are going to resurrect physically, whereas that's a false interpretation of it. But if that doesn't literally happen, then all the people that hold the literal meaning say, well, obviously Christ didn't come because the bodies didn't come out of the ground yet. These are the kind of things that veil people. Then he refers to the breaking of the everlasting morn, 3 degrees of the perception of truth. We'll read that part now. Exhortation to the people of the Bayan, the confirmation of all things is belief in the promised one. On page 82, the phrase, verily our word is abstruse. Go back if you want to identify that before we move on. Our word is abstruse, bewilderingly abstruse, and our cause is sorely trying, highly perplexing, and so on. Both of these are traditions attributed to Muhammad, hadith attributed to the Prophet Muhammad. We have reference on page 83 to the Qa'im, the expected Qa'im. This is the title of the promised one of Shia Islam, whose coming is fulfilled in the appearance of the Bab. Literally, Qa'im means he who arises. And it's understood that it means he who arises from the Bani Hashem, from the family of Muhammad. In other words, from his descendants. He will be a descendant, and he will arise, and he will proclaim his mission. The Bab is the return of the 12th Imam, only in a spiritual sense, just as Baha'u'llah is the return of the Spirit of Christ. This is a letter of Shoghi Effendi in 1939. We don't believe in the reincarnation of the spirits of the manifestations, but the return of the qualities. And when the qualities are the same, then that return is considered to be the return of the former manifestation, or the former disciple, if you will. You remember one of the tablets of Baha'u'llah, and the tablets Baha'u'llah revealed after the Aqtab. He talks about Mullah Hussein having the position and station and being the appearance in this day of the Prophet Muhammad. Curious that the Bab's first disciple should have that position and those qualities of a manifestation, that a manifestation manifested at an earlier stage. Now we should remember that also the manifestations reveal themselves in accordance with the capacity of the people. They have more they could reveal. In fact, Baha'u'llah affirms that if in the time of Christ the people had been prepared for this manifestation, that Christ would have manifested this revelation. It isn't that, this is especially linked to Baha'u'llah. Each of the manifestations has the full potentiality, because they are one reality spiritually. But they have played a designated mission with a specific task and a prescribed appearance, if you will. Let's see, corruption of the books. Briefly, modification by the exalted beings and alteration by the disdainful, page 84. If you want to keep track of these unregistered notes. You see there in the middle paragraph, in the middle of the page, modification by the exalted beings and alteration by the disdainful. These are words attributed to the Imams. And Ibn Surya is a rabbi chosen by the people of Khaybar that lived near where Muhammad was in Medina at Muhammad's request to cite a point of Jewish law. And there's a story here which I hope you have read. Khaybar is the famous oasis about 100 miles north of Medina. It was heavily populated with Jewish farmers and merchants. The Battle of Khaybar, you can see more about that on page 168 of Íqán, is a cross-reference to that. The valor of Ali, the Imam Ali, was particularly demonstrated at this Battle of Khaybar. Nebuchadnezzar, the Amalekites, Pentateuch, I think you can find the meaning of those things yourselves in different places. On page 89 is the reference to this fourth heaven. In about the middle of the second paragraph section there, it says, "How could God, when once the day star of the beauty of Jesus had disappeared from the sight of His people and ascended unto the fourth heaven, cause His holy book, His most great testimony amongst His creatures, to disappear also?" He was arguing that the Muslims were saying that the Jewish scripture and the Christian scripture have been completely corrupted and you can't trust any of it. And he's using these scriptures and really showing the proofs from them and so on. The fourth heaven, there's a letter from the Guardian about this. He says, "As to the ascent of Christ to the fourth heaven as revealed in the glorious book of Íqán, he, the Guardian, stated that the fourth heaven is a term used and a belief held by the early astronomers. The followers of the Shia sect likewise held this belief. As the Íqán was revealed for the guidance of that sect, this term was used in conformity with the concepts of its followers." This is a letter translated from the Persian, dated 23 February 1945. In the ancient scheme of the seven heavens or spheres, the sun was located in the fourth heaven. Moving on to page 90. In allusion to his own revelation, Baha'u'llah says, "Dear friend, now when the light of God's everlasting morn is breaking, when the radiance of His holy words, God is the light of the heavens and of the earth, is shedding illumination upon all mankind, when the inviolability of His tabernacle is being proclaimed by His sacred utterance, God hath willed to perfect His light, and the hand of omnipotence bearing His testimony, in His grasp He holdeth the kingdom of all things as being outstretched unto all the peoples and kindreds of the earth. It behoveth us to gird up the loins of endeavor, that haply by the grace and bounty of God we may enter the celestial city. Verily we are God's, and abide within the exalted habitation, and unto Him we do return. It is incumbent upon thee, by the permission of God, to cleanse the eye of thine heart from the things of the world, that thou mayest realize the infinitude of divine knowledge, and mayest behold truth so clearly that thou wilt need no proof to demonstrate His reality, nor any evidence to bear witness unto His testimony. O affectionate seeker," and here he gives 3 stages of certitude, if you will. "Shouldst thou soar in the holy realm of the Spirit, thou wouldst recognize God manifest and exalted above all things, in such wise that thine eyes would behold none else but Him. God was alone, there was none else besides Him. So lofty is this station, if no testimony can bear it witness, neither evidence nor justice, or do justice to its truth." And the second one, "Wert thou to explore the sacred domain of truth, realm of the Spirit, and now domain of truth, thou wilt find that all things are known only by the light of His recognition, that He hath ever been and will continue forever to be known through Himself. And if thou dwellest in the land of testimony," the third of the stages, not the highest, they're in opposite order from that, "content thyself with that which He Himself hath revealed. Is it not enough for them that we have sent down unto thee the book? This is the testimony which He Himself hath ordained. Greater proof than this there is none.
nor ever will be. This proof is His Word, His own self, the testimony of His truth. And finally, this exhortation to the people of the Bayan transcends the immediate object of the book, which is the uncle of the Bab, and moves now to the people of the Bayan. And now we beseech the people of the Bayan, all the learned, the sages, the divines, and witnesses amongst them, not to forget the wishes and admonitions revealed in their book. Let them at all times fix their gaze upon the essentials of His cause, lest when He who is the quintessence of truth, the inmost reality of all things, the source of all light, is made manifest, they cling unto certain passages of the book and inflict upon Him that which was inflicted in the dispensation of the Quran. For verily powerful is He, the King of divine might, to extinguish with one letter of His wondrous words the breath of life in the whole of the Bayan and the people thereof, and with one letter bestow upon them a new and everlasting life, and cause them to arise and speed out of the sepulchres of their vain and selfish desires. Take heed and be watchful, and remember that all things have their consummation in belief in Him, in attainment unto His day, and in the realization of His divine presence, and so on. Now these titles here are titles that Baha'u'llah is applying to himself, if you think. The quintessence of truth, the inmost reality of all things, the source of all light. Allusions to His coming, to that light that's already in Him, and which He is revealing in a veiled way here, but yet not in such a veiled way. He keeps calling him to it. He says, look at this passage we read. Now when the light of God's everlasting morn is breaking. Now we're talking about what the date of this is 1862. I mean, we're talking about 12 years after the martyrdom of the Bab. And he's alluding to this luminous appearance that's taking place of divine truth, as embodied particularly here in this case. This section, powerful is He, the King of divine might, has been cited by Shoghi Effendi in his exposition of the greatness of Baha'u'llah's station in God Passes By. Pages 98 and 99 of God Passes By, you'll find that same thing there. And he states clearly in that passage of God Passes By that Baha'u'llah is here alluding to himself. In the light of this clarification, reread the titles in the preceding lines and so on. Now we have the questions for the next two sections of the book that we'll be studying. And I'll pass those out. We probably have to go back to the list of the former questions. We didn't do all of those, I don't think, yet, did we? We'll come back to those next week, review them briefly. These are the questions for pages 97 to 147, roughly 50 pages again, and then from 147 to 192. And there's 10, 11 questions in each section. Someone like to pass these out?